Everyone, welcome back to Pencils and Lipstick. This is episode 322, and it is the last full week of August of 2026. Back to school season. Yes. I am very excited to bring another interview to you guys. Today I am talking to JD Barker. He is an action and thriller and horror writer. He has worked with James Patterson. He worked in the literary industry, the publishing industry since like the 90s. He has so much information to give us, plus like just chatting about his books. He talks really fast. So if you guys, um, listen to this like on speed, you might want to turn it down actually, just to normal, depending on how quickly you can listen. He just has so much information to give. It was so lovely to talk to him. So that interview will start in just a second. Even if you're like a romance writer, you're probably going to want to listen to JD Barker. Just listening to people who have been in this business for a while, it's so informative. It'll open your eyes to things that you just haven't considered. So anyway, I highly recommend this interview. As usual, I had such a good time talking to him. I have a good time talking to everyone who comes on the show. So we have a lot of interviews coming up I'm booked out through November, but if you want to be on the show, you have to be somebody who has worked in the industry for a while or has published at least 3 books and have like something to talk about, because this show is for the writing process and the publishing process. And so we're trying to, it's great to get, advice on writing our books, but we definitely want advice and thoughts and experiences in the whole like publishing and continuing to publish and market. Speaking of marketing, at the moment, I have decided to go with Facebook ads, and I have to say they are working much better than Amazon ads. Now, Facebook's about to change things up, which I was just reading an article from David Cochran today. So I'm not excited about that. Just as I learn one thing, I have to, learn the changes that they're making, but such is the world of publishing these days. The Facebook ads are solving one pain point in finding new readers for my books. So that is, it's fun to see, the reading go through the roof and selling different ebooks and paperbacks. Of course, there's still more to learn from them, but yeah, that is my news. Amazon ads did not work as well for me. But I'm actually hoping that the more that new readers download my books, the more Amazon will learn about the demographics of the readers. Since I write a couple different genres, I think that's one of my pain points as an author. And this is why a lot of people suggest pen names. Of course, I didn't do that. And so there's just, something that I have to deal with. But yeah, I am actually going through Matthew J. Holmes's Facebook class. I guess it would be like it's a course. So I that's the only one that I know. That's the one that I really like it. There are lots of people who teach Facebook, or you can try it by yourself. That's just, I know I tried it before and it didn't work. I just spent a lot of money with very little results. So I decided to find somebody who could teach me. But if you guys don't know, all my books are in KU. I know I'm talking to all you writers, but if you're looking for something to read, I've decided to keep them in KU for the time being, actually, just because it's a lot. A lot is on my plate. So as we go into the fall, I am focusing a lot. There's so many things to do, right? I thought about making more audiobooks. I thought about getting some translations done. And at the moment, I'm just focusing on, I'm going to get the books done that I have started. And I am going to focus on marketing and starting Black Friday stuff. So if you are marketing or struggling with marketing, or want to be a little bit better about it this time around in the fall going into Christmas, I suggest that you listen to the Craft and Connect, which will be in about 3 weeks. It's the third week of the month of September. I'll be talking with Becky Grogan. You can also head over to her website and check out her free resources. And you can join her group, which is going to be in the link below. I think there's only a few spots left, like maybe one or two. I was talking to her the other day. So by the time this goes out or you're listening, it might be full, but I suggest you check it out or maybe even get on the waiting list for next time she runs it. But she still has free resources and she has a great newsletter. Congrats, Becky, on your newsletter. And all of you who don't have a newsletter, you need to get one. But you should get on my newsletter because my little chat on convincing you to get a newsletter will probably be part of my end of the year sale. So just a little preview for you. So if you are listening to this, whatever you're listening to it on, will you please like, subscribe, share, give a review? That is always helpful, especially if you're on like Apple or Spotify. Those are the two main places. If you're on a different one, it's still helpful. If you know other writers, please share it. If you want to see me or see my guests, you should go over to YouTube. It's at Pencils and Lipstick, all spelled out. Very easy to find. The logo's there. You can find it and you can watch the interviews. 99.9% of my interviewees consent to being recorded so you can see them, see the mess that is my office. You shouldn't see this part. So I try to not give too much mess to you guys. But you can see my office, you can see Becky, you can see all my other guests. So I highly suggest that you go there as well. And please sign up for my newsletter if you want more from me. I have both a writer's and a reader's newsletter. So that is all that I have for you today because I'm so excited to get into this interview because JD has so much to tell us. I am going to go straight into that. So without further ado, let's get into the interview. All right, everyone. I am super excited to be talking with JD Barker today. I have known about you for a long time, although I read thrillers sporadically, but I'm very excited to talk to you guys about your writing and your books. And I know quite a few people are thriller or mystery writers, and I have a few horror writers, but we'll see. We'll get into all of it because you have been around writing in all of the areas of the arts. So thank you so much for coming on the show, JD. It's fun to meet you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, I usually ask people how they get into writing, but you actually have a lot of information on your website. So I have read your whole biography and you had quite a roundabout way of getting into, well, maybe not roundabout, but it wasn't like directly into your fiction writing. So could you tell us just a little bit about you, like what genres you write, and then we'll get into all the experience that you've had.
Sure. Yeah. So I was told by my parents that at a very early age, writing is a great hobby, but you can't make a living at it. You have to get a real job.
Oh, gosh.
And, I was a kid, so I didn't know any better. So I finished up school. I went off to college. I got a degree in finance, but I would write on the side to stay sane. And when I was in college and even during my early years in the financial industry, I would work on these like little projects. And it basically fell into a side hustle as a book doctor and a ghostwriter, helping other people get published. I would work with agents. I would work with editors and fine-tune manuscripts and get them ready for publication. I did that for 23 years while I was working in finance. And over that time frame, I had 6 different books that hit the New York Times list that all came out with other people's names on the cover that I had essentially written because they were ghostwritten titles. That gets old after a while.
Yeah, I bet.
So my wife pulled me aside and she said, listen, I know you want to become a full-time author. Let's figure out how to make this happen. But at this point, we were kind of stuck because I was a chief compliance officer at a brokerage firm. I had a really good salary. I hated the job, but it paid well. And we had all the trappings of that. We had a big house, we had cars, we had a boat. So she came up with this crazy plan. We sold everything that we owned. We bought a tiny little duplex in Pittsburgh for cash. We rented out one side to some tenants, and we moved into the other side in order to, live off of savings long enough for me to write that first book.
Your wife suggested that?
That was all my wife. I honestly, I
Wow.
did not have the guts to do that on my own. Like she
Kudos to
pulled the
her.
trigger. Yeah. I remember sitting down at the kitchen table in our tiny little apartment, and she showed me the bank statement, and she said, "It looks like you got about 18 months to make this work before you have to get another job." And go. And
Go
honestly,
do it.
nothing like putting your feet to the coals to really make something happen.
Yeah.
And that was my first book. That was about 11 years ago, and it's been this crazy roller coaster ever since.
That was Forsaken.
That
The
was
one that
Forsaken. Yeah.
Okay. But so you had experience, and I mean you had like traditional publishing experience before that point. You knew
Yeah,
what was
I
what
had
was coming.
I had behind the scenes experience.
Yeah,
So, like, to
okay.
give you an example, an editor would buy a book. Let's say he works at Penguin Random House and he loves this book. It's a debut author, but it's got problems. And they'll go back to the author and try to get them to fix those problems. And it could be, we have to trim 50,000 words out. Your dialogue's not sharp enough. There's a million different things that it could be. But a lot of times, a debut author just isn't capable of doing that. So they would hire me as a hired gun. We'd have one phone call. They'd say, this needs to be fixed. This needs to be fixed. They didn't sugarcoat anything because, I was brought in to correct it. And I did that for so long that I basically got like a peek behind the curtain of what the folks in New York felt really needed to be in a book in order for it to
Right.
sell. And that was my education really in this. I don't have any formal training as a writer other than, like I read a lot. I learned story structure because of the books that I read.
Right.
But I've never taken any actual classes on it outside of the norm.
I had no idea that that was a thing. That like
It happens all
why
the time.
but
I,
what's the point of not okay, I'm just like I
Well,
want to
I'll give
focus
you a
on
couple
you and
more
your
examples.
books. Okay.
I wrote a ton of memoirs for other people. The very first one, I was on the field at a Miami Dolphins game, and I walked up to a very famous player, and we were talking. And I said, "Hey, have you ever considered writing down your life story?" Because he had a fascinating history.
Okay.
And he said, "I'd love to. I get offers for that all the time, but I don't have the skill to do that." So
Okay.
ultimately, we struck a deal. His agent went out and sold the book at a seven-figure deal before we even wrote anything. I wrote the book. He took credit for it because it was a ghostwritten title.
Right.
But when you write memoirs, you basically have to write a book in the other person's, usually first person as a narrative,
Yeah.
and you're writing it in their voice, which really
Okay.
helped me learn how to write characters. Because I was in the heads of
Right.
all these different people, and I did so many of those. So there were a lot of projects like that. Sometimes a well-known author, like I had one where he turned in a book and it wasn't done, but he had to go out on tour, so they hired me to finish it. I wrote the second half of the book based on the outline that they gave me, but I wrote it in his voice. That kind of stuff happens all the time. Like if you think Britney Spears actually wrote her own autobiography, you're missing something.
Yeah. Well, I knew that part, but I didn't know that like well-known fiction authors or a debut author, like they would make up for that time that they hadn't if they don't know how to fix their own book. It almost seems a bit counterintuitive. Like how are they going to write the second one if they don't know
Well,
how to fix it?
I mean, like when I work, like if I work with an author on it, like hand in hand, I show them what I'm fixing and I explain
Yeah.
why. I love to mentor authors and help them
Right.
tweak, which is partly why
That
I
makes
do
more
so many co-author
sense,
stuff.
right? But I guess on timelines,
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
like
it's just, it's a business, right? These
right.
people, a lot of times they spend a lot of money for these books. They have to make sure they recoup, so they bring in somebody that really knows how to, dot all the I's and cross the T's.
But I feel like that's probably better than taking any class in writing though, because you're really seeing what is selling, what makes it fast paced, what they're cutting out, what they want put back in. I mean, that's almost just a crash
Yeah, I
course.
mean, honestly, like I've steered clear of classes just because of that old adage, if you can't do it, teach.
Yeah.
So like I don't want to, I don't want to get an MFA from somebody who couldn't sell their own books.
Yes,
Like I
true.
write books with James Patterson. I just talked to him
Right.
20 minutes ago. Like he
Right.
told me what to do, on some pages that I
Yeah.
do. Like that is education from the best.
Yeah.
I've always gone to like the biggest names off, I could, just to get tips and tricks.
Okay. So when you are like by day you're finance and by night you're writing, but
Yeah.
it never got to the point in the 90s and 2000s where you thought that you could do the writing full time until your wife told you to do it.
It was a tricky thing because, the finance thing just paid so well.
Yeah,
I was
it
working
does pay well, doesn't
60
it?
to 80 hours a week doing that. So there wasn't a whole lot of time. And,
Okay.
so many of these book projects that I worked on, I saw people that just, they didn't succeed. Like so many books come out, only a handful of them
Okay.
actually make a living at it. I had a sure thing. with the
Oh,
finance gig.
sure.
As much as I
Okay.
hated the job, like it paid the bills. So
Okay.
that's how I looked at it. But my wife, when we talked that one day, she said, "Okay, I want you to picture something. You're 80 years old. You're sitting on a porch in a rocking chair. You're looking back on your life. Are you going to be happy with every decision you made? Are you going to be happy if you don't try the writing thing?" And
Okay.
like that really clicked for me because in my world, I would much rather try something and fall flat on my face than look back on it and say, "What if?"
Right. And I guess you have the skills to, if you had to fall back into a business or, a different job, you had the resume already. Like you
Yeah, I mean,
just,
it's honestly helped me with this, because I get my words
I
done
bet.
around 11, 12 o'clock or so during the day, and then I put my marketing and business hat on, and I have to do that
Okay.
whole side of this,
I know.
which is
That never
a whole other,
ends.
yeah, it's a whole other world. And it's most authors were introverts, right? Like you don't want
Yeah,
to sit down and
I
talk to
know.
anybody. You want to hide behind your desk and, play pretend all day.
Exactly.
But in the real world, you have to talk to advertisers. You have to do this. You have to do that, and like you have to be able to switch that. And
Yeah.
luckily, I've had feet in both camps, so I understand how it works.
Okay. So did Forsaken come out? Did you do it traditionally published?
No, I indie published that one,
Okay.
but in the story, I had to explain where the wife buys a journal. So just to get the book finished, I wrote that she walked into Needful Things, Stephen King's store.
Yeah.
Fully expected to have to change that, but again, my wife read it and she's like, before you change it, let's see if we can get King's permission to do it. And ultimately, I was
Smart
able to do
woman.
that. King read the manuscript. He gave me his blessing to use the reference, and that kind of really kicked off my career because initially, like the book came out, and just like any other debut author, nobody knew it was there. It sold a couple of
Right.
copies. The reviews were good, but not, didn't hit it out of the park like I wanted it to.
Right.
But when publications learned that I had gotten Stephen King's permission on this, I had a couple articles that were written about it. That
Okay.
libraries started picking it up, bookstores started picking it up, and ultimately I sold a lot of copies. So for my next title, which was The Fourth Monkey, I got a pretty significant traditional publishing deal.
Yeah, that was your next one because I mean, I know that book. Yeah, I mean, of all the millions of books out there, the fact that before I ever knew who you were, like I know that book. So that's so you did those two. Did you by 2014 though, like you had extensive experience working for magazines and but were those sort of contacts not really around anymore? I assume like by 2014 a lot of these magazines were not around for you to be like, "Hey, I wrote a book. Will you, you know,
Yeah, no,
write
no,
about it?"
I wish. A lot of the book doctor and ghostwriting projects I had came out of that world. Like if you work at a
Yeah.
newspaper, every reporter's got a novel at some stage of development in a desk drawer somewhere. It's 400,000 words long. They've been working on it for 10 years. It's almost done. And they would hand it to me and get my opinion on it. And initially I just fixed grammar and punctuation, but then I started giving them developmental edits and things like that. And that's essentially what turned into the book doctor gig.
Okay. Okay. But those were kind of like by 2014, you were like
They
on your own pretty
Yeah,
much.
they
You
were
had a,
gone. I mean, I hired a publicist who was a friend of mine that I had worked with. She used to work with bands out in L.A. back in the 80s and 90s, like all the hair bands. Like she was their publicist. So I actually hired her to be my publicist for the book. So like that was probably the only contact I was actually able to
yeah.
get from that because yeah, everybody had moved on. The newspapers had folded. The magazines either went online or disappeared.
Right.
The world has just changed so much.
It had changed. I just wanted to say that because a lot of times, we'll be listening to podcasts and listeners are like, yeah, but it's JD Barker, yeah, but, like, but you were starting out kind of in this new world of independent publishing and ebooks.
Yeah, I mean, if people Google me and read some of the stuff that I've done, like it's been a crazy, ridiculous career so far. But it's been 11 years, and if you go back 11 years, I started in the same place as everybody else. I had no
Right.
books out there, zero people on my mailing list, nobody knew who I was.
Yeah.
So the real takeaway is just look at the decisions that I've made.
Yeah.
Not all of them work out. I've fallen on my face many a times, but I'm not willing to take it, or I am willing to take a chance, and because
Right.
of that, a lot of those do turn into home runs. And
Right.
that's what you really have to I think about as an author. I mean, my main like every time I've got a book coming out, I look at what everybody else is doing, and then I come up with something that nobody is doing in order to push that
Really?
title, and that's what really works for me.
Okay. That's interesting because I feel like a lot of authors try to do the same thing. I
Yeah,
mean,
no, you can. I mean, you can do Facebook ads and Amazon ads, but the problem is then you're never going to succeed any more than the other people that are doing the same thing. To give you an example, my last book was called Something I Keep Upstairs. It was a haunted
Mm-hmm.
house story,
Mm-hmm.
and the actual house in the story is real. It's a real house. It's about a mile off the coast where I live here on in New England. So to promote that book, I actually gave away an overnight stay in the real haunted house at the basis of the book.
Oh, that's
And
scary.
yeah, and as soon as we put out a press release saying author giving away an overnight stay to a reader, I did television, I did radio, I did tons of podcasts. Everybody was writing about it. People were talking about it online. All that chatter was essentially free, but it sold a lot of books. Now,
Yeah,
if another author comes up and writes a haunted house story, they could try to do the same thing, but it's not going to work as well because I've already done it. So you have to come up
interesting.
with that one thing that nobody's done yet to promote your title, and there's always something there. You just have to really think about it.
Well, I think you said something interesting, like not only finding something new, but using kind of the traditional methods as well. Like I wonder if sometimes in this modern, 2026, we forget that you can do press releases, that you can approach local newspapers and radio shows. Like, don't you feel like we're all like Amazon ads and not as much like what is
Yeah, no,
free?
press releases are huge, and this is something that I've got working with Patterson. Like if he comes up with a new deal, like he's going to write a book with Dolly Parton, he announces that before they write the first word, and like that
Mm,
generates a significant amount of buzz. And I've been doing the same thing. I've got a national PR company that will put out a release, and what happens is that release comes out, all these publications pick up on it, then that generates people calling me asking for interviews, and all of that. The cost of the press release is I think $500. So it's not a
yeah,
huge amount of money. But the amount of noise that it creates, like you can't replicate that. And if you do it over and over and over again, it basically comes down to the core of selling everything, which is brand. You need to get your brand in front of people's eyeballs as many times as possible before they're willing to pull the trigger on it. So,
okay.
people see my name over here, they see it over here, they see it over here. Eventually they walk into Walmart or a bookstore and they see it on a cover and they pick up that book and they may, they remember me, they may not know why, but I seem
Right.
familiar, and then they buy that book.
Yeah, that's a really good point to make, honestly. I do think that we tend to run around a lot on the internet circles, and not necessarily thinking, because if you think about like even $500, people can spend that on poor advertising all the time on Facebook. I mean, those platforms are made for us basically to fail. Like in the sense of
Well,
like they want the money. It doesn't matter to them if anyone buys your book or not, right?
yeah, they will take your money all day long.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things that scares me about it.
Yeah.
And they're not as effective as they used to be. None of
No.
that stuff is. Even a BookBub ad. You used to be able to get one of those and you'd sell thousands of copies in a day. That just doesn't happen anymore. You're lucky
No.
if you recoup.
It's very true. It's very true. So when you're also you're well, let me see what direction I want to go. You have worked with a lot of people. So you've been publishing for not even 12 years, like on your own.
Yeah, November of 2014 is
Okay.
when the first book came out.
You have I mean, I can't even count that quickly. You have over a dozen books out, at
I
least.
I have 19 at last
19.
count.
Okay.
I thought it was 12, and then I had to write a speech at my next book release party. And I looked at my Wikipedia page, and it's
Really?
actually 19.
Look at that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, some of these you wrote with people. Most of them you wrote by yourself. How did you get this many books written?
Well, I mean, I write fairly fast. I write
Do
two
you,
to 3,000 words a day. See, that's
you
three or
write
four
every
books on my
day?
own. I even wrote on my wedding day, which got me in trouble. So yeah, the only day I take off is Sundays because that's dad and daughter day, and I spend the
Okay.
whole day with my daughter. So
Sure.
that's
Sure.
the only day. But
Okay.
yeah, it's to me it's like going to the gym. Like if you do it every day, that writing muscle gets stronger and stronger, and you're able to produce more. And if you step
Okay.
away for a week, then it's everything just kind
It's
of
hard.
goes. Yeah, it's hard. You can't do quite as much. So yeah, I like to write every day. Yeah, I spent the bulk of my career working with other people, collaborating on the book doctor and ghostwriting stuff. So it actually feels weird for me to sit down and write a book by myself.
Okay.
So I like to mix it up.
Yeah. But do you only work on one book at a time?
I've got 12 books right now in the pipeline.
Oh my gosh. So no,
Yeah,
the answer is very clearly no.
and this also comes from working with Patterson. Like the first time that
Okay.
I met him, I went to his house in Palm Beach, and he let me in, and we walked to his office, and like literally every surface had a manuscript on it. You know, like the stairs going up to his second floor, every step had a manuscript sitting there. They were everywhere. And then we get to his
Wow.
office, and it's this big square room, and it's like lined with bookcases, and every surface more manuscripts, and like he knew exactly what was going on with every single one of those. He knew you know, because he's writing them, he's reading them, he's working on them. Like
That's
that to me
crazy.
inspired me. I mean, he's 79 years old now. He sounds like he's, you know, 20 when you talk to him on the phone. Like he's just got so much energy, and like I think a lot of what I'm doing is I'm chasing Patterson.
Wow. I mean, how many people is he working with? Like he's just an empire at this point. Like it's so
He's like
impressive.
he's a publishing force all by himself. He's got an
Yeah.
entire division in his shed that does nothing but work on his books.
That's impressive. Like I mean, and he came from
He came from
copywriting,
nothing.
right? Like, yeah,
He
nothing.
grew up in a boarding house. You know, like he
Wow.
poor as
That's
dirt
so
when he was a kid.
I mean, when you know someone like that, you can't help but like keep working, right? Like there's really no
That's the
excuse.
thing, you know. Like he'll call me, and like, you know, I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll take the afternoon off, and then I talk to him, and you know, it's like there's no way
I
gotta
gotta
catch
keep
up to
up
this
with this
guy.
guy.
And he's been helping me quite a bit. Like I just signed a deal with Simon and Schuster where they let me create my own imprint. He's
Oh,
basically
nice.
helping me create almost like a James Patterson 2.0 using the tools that are available today. So I've got a
Okay.
number of titles I'm working on with co-authors. You know, I've got some nonfiction stuff coming out. I'm basically following his model, but he's helping me avoid the stuff where he, you know, the mistakes he made, and just kind of focus on the things that worked.
Okay.
I'm a lucky guy.
Well, but I mean, it sounds like you haven't been shy in asking questions of people. Like if
No.
you just ask Stephen King, I think most people don't ask, right? Like we just assume they're going to say no and then we don't ask and then you never know.
Yeah, and I've always been the kind of person who asks. You know, when I started talking to writers and lecturing, I was at Thriller Fest one year, and like I went and got in the elevator, and Lee Child was there, and like he was in the elevator with us, and one other author that I knew was a big fan of Lee Child really wanted to get a blurb from Lee Child. You know, so we're in there riding the elevator from the first floor up to the fourth floor. You know, 15 seconds or so. That was her window. You know, like I wanted to kick her in the leg. I was like, this is your opportunity. You got the guy right here. And like, and she didn't ask the question. Like I would have completely asked the question. I would
Yeah.
rather get shot down, you know, have Lee say, no, I don't have time to read it or whatever. But, you know, to watch him stand there and everybody quiet and watch him leave that elevator and the expression on her face, like, because she didn't make that ask, you know, like every author needs to ask the question. Like,
Yeah.
and the funny thing is when you talk to some of these guys, you know, they've all been in the same place. You know, like, you know, Stephen King wrote Carrie in a trailer. You know, like he was
Yeah.
wedged between a washer and dryer. He was working in a laundromat. You know, like they've all had crappy jobs. They know what it's like to write that first book and to sell that first book, and they don't forget that. So if you approach
Yeah.
them as an author and you're at this particular stage, they know what that was like, and they will reach a hand back and they'll help you. Most of them.
Yeah. 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 That's very important to remember. So what you write several genres. Do you have a favorite that you
My favorite
prefer?
is horror.
Okay.
When I was a kid, my mom owned an antique store, and we used to go to a lot of garage sales. And
Yeah.
I was 8 years old, and up to that point, I had read like all the classics and Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew and stuff like that. This guy had a box of books, and Dracula was sitting on the top for I think it was 25 cents. And she let me buy it. I took it home and read it, and it scared the crap out of me. For like 3 weeks, I slept with the lights on. I'm looking under my bed, and that was like the first time a book had ever made, you know, gotten an emotional reaction out of me. And I think I've
Yeah.
been chasing that feeling as a reader and a writer ever since. So horror is
Okay.
definitely my first love. But I like writing thrillers, and I didn't want to get caught in, you know, a lot of authors, they write a book, it sells really well, and then they have to write that same book but different every year for the rest of their lives. I didn't want to
Right.
be that guy. So I purposely started with a horror novel, then I wrote a thriller novel, then I wrote another horror novel. I wrote a prequel to Dracula for Bram Stoker's family, another thriller after that. I bounced back and forth. And then at one point, my editor called me and he said, well, we just did some numbers and it looks like your readership is women 45 and over. That's your primary market, so that's who we need to target. So he wanted me to write a book for that particular group. So instead, I wrote a young adult book because my general thinking was I've already got women 45 and over. What I don't have are these people over here. So I'm going to write a book to target this group, bring them into the fold, and now all of a sudden I've got everybody. So I use the books almost like it being a literary Pied Piper. I look for a hole
Yeah.
that I'm not filling, and I write a book that actually targets that group to expand my audience.
I am very impressed by this thought process because like it again it goes against everything everyone is teaching right now, niche down, niche down. But the truth is like from yours and my generation, we would just pick up a book. Like it wasn't
Well,
made for our age or whatever. Like you just picked up a book and you either liked it or you didn't like it. And that
it
was
still
it.
happens though. Like if I walked into Barnes and Noble very early in my career, and if you stand at that entrance and you just look at the titles that are there, you're going to see certain names. You're going to see Stephen King. You're going to see James Patterson. You're going to see Nora Roberts. Their name is huge on the cover. The title of the book is like this, and then you've
Yeah.
got all these other authors that are kind of the mid-listers. Where their title is this big, their name is this big, and if you take a step back, what's really happening there is the publishers are doubling down on brand. Stephen King is a
Yeah.
brand. Patterson, Nora
Right.
Roberts, they are all brands.
Right.
On the other side of it, those other people, they've got a 2-book deal. They're going to sell. The publisher wants to sell those 2 books. They really don't care anymore if they build a brand name author. They don't have the wherewithal anymore. So they're
Yeah.
going to get what they can out of that 1 or 2 book deal with that author, and then move on to the next one and move on to the next one. But authors get caught up in that because they don't know any better. I got tons of pushback at the beginning. When I turned in, my first book was horror, and then I turned in a thriller. My agent's like, "What are you doing?" My editor didn't want it, because it was just so different. I forced it down their throat, and I kept doing that. I didn't give them a choice. And what I ended up seeing, particularly in the foreign markets, I had some publishers that would only buy the horror, or would only buy the thrillers. But then all of a sudden, they started realizing I'm selling a lot of books, and they started picking up the other ones that I had written that they hadn't published before, and they saw my audience get even bigger. And they realized that, as long as the books are connected in some way, like in my case, I try to keep a common thread of suspense. So I can
Okay.
write a suspense book that's got elements of horror or sci-fi or romance or whatever, but as long as suspense is there, I can kind of bring
Yeah.
people into the fold. I think if you've got that common thread, you can tie it all together. And if you look at
Yeah.
somebody like Stephen King, I mean, that's what he's done,
Right.
from get-go. He's basically created a brand by jumping around in different genres and just, bringing people into his fold.
Yeah, this is something that I try to talk about on the podcast a lot of like making the decisions that you're very confident in. And I dislike this idea these days of authors being pulled everywhere, especially if they're starting out or they're just small. Most of us only have a few books out there. We're like trying to do the things, but it's taking the moment and looking like you were just saying, like, how is my cover? How is everyone else's cover? Do I want a brand or not? And then making that decision that you are confident enough in that when somebody pushes back, you say, no, I'm going to do it like this. And I have my reasons why. And like, if it fails, it fails. But if you go forward in it, like, at least you did it because you knew what you were doing. You wanted
Yeah.
to.
I think in the traditional world that happens a lot, because you feel special because all of a sudden you've got a contract in front of you. So you just
Right.
sign it. Like you don't even,
Right.
you don't push back on any of it.
Yeah.
And you do what you're told because you just assume these people know better than me. I'm going to keep my
Yeah.
mouth shut. I'm going to listen. But they know what's best for them. They don't know necessarily
Yeah.
what's best for you. And that's what you
Yeah.
really need to focus on.
Yeah. Okay. So then the first Scarlet Door this is a thriller, 4MC thriller. What is the 4MC series about?
For MK. So it's
For sorry, my
yeah.
eyes are not as
So,
good as they used to be.
So
For
in my
MK.
my first thriller was called The Fourth Monkey. It's
Okay,
about a
yep.
serial killer in Chicago. He's been operating in the city for about 5 years, so everybody knows who he is. They know his MO. He kidnaps a girl, he cuts off her ear, and he mails it to that girl's family in a little white box tied with a black string. He's been doing this over and over again, but the police have no clue who he is.
Wow.
So at the beginning of Fourth Monkey, I wanted to do something different. So my killer is walking across the street. He's got a little white box tied with a black string. He's about to mail it. He gets hit by a city bus and killed. So the police know that they've got their killer. He's got no ID on him, so they don't know who he is. But they know that he already kidnapped another victim, and she's out there somewhere. So they have to try to find her. Now, it's a great premise, but I had to figure out how to, introduce my killer to the readers because he's dead. So like, how do I bring him back into the story?
It's a great
So
first chapter, but
yeah, so
where's
as a
your
writer,
killer?
I'm like, how do I bring them? How do I get
Yeah.
the other 80 chapters that I need?
Okay.
So I created these diary entries. The police find the killer's diary, and through that, we get glimpses of his childhood and how he grew up and the things that happened around him.
Okay.
And I carried that forward through the entire initial trilogy, and readers loved it. And it's funny because initially the publishers wanted to strip that out. They're like, like, we don't want the diary entries. We just want to put this out as a straight up thriller. That was going to be their plan, and I pushed back on that too. And luckily, it worked out. And the book's been out, I guess, about 10 years now. And it's constantly hitting bestseller lists in new
Yeah.
countries and new places. It's all based on word of mouth, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Whenever I travel, people would put those books in front of me and they wanted to know more about the killer. Like, they loved the diary entries. They wanted to know more about his backstory. And like, I kept hearing that over and over again when I went out on these book tours. And then COVID hit. And I sat down and I was like, I'm going to try something. Up until that point, like, I had all these projects I was working on. I felt like I was on a roller coaster. I'm going to write a book and not tell anybody. So I ended up writing 3 prequels to my 4MK thriller series, all based on the serial killer. So I basically fill in 15 years worth of blank history in these 3 prequels. Wow. And I didn't tell anybody I was working on them, which was very refreshing, because if I had to change something in book 1 to accommodate an idea I had in book 3, like, I was able to keep tweaking them right up until the very end.
Right.
And then I brought them to my agent and I was like, I want to put these all out on the same day. And like, not tell anybody they're coming out. I don't want to do any advanced press. I just want, maybe a PR announcement saying they're coming out tomorrow, but like, drop them all on the same day. And I was able to do that if I wanted to, because I've got my own publishing imprint at Simon & Schuster.
Okay.
So that was the plan going in. And then when we started talking to my foreign publishers, we got a lot of pushback because they don't have the ability to put out 3 books for the same author at the same time. It's too much.
Okay.
So ultimately, we're releasing them. I think there's about 6 months in between each title.
Okay.
But so the first one is the first Scarlet Door. It comes out in September, and I'm basically revisiting my serial killer and filling in that backstory.
So he was active doing stuff before
Well, it's
the series starts.
I've got halfway through a psychology degree in college. I love psychology. And when I wrote The Fourth Monkey, the question I was trying to answer for myself is, could a serial killer be made? Like, if you take somebody who's a perfectly good person and put them in the wrong circumstances over and over again, could that turn that person into a killer? So he basically starts off as a good guy. So if you read The Fourth Monkey, like, you actually feel bad for the serial killer at the end, probably more so than the victims. People are rooting for him. But when you read these prequels, you basically, from the age 15 until about 30, we basically see what happened to him that, caused him to go from this nice kid to, a serial killer, which was a lot of fun to write.
I bet that was fun to write. And sometimes it just takes, like, I don't know why our brains just need some time to figure out that character, right? Like, that character's always been with you. It just took maybe a worldwide pandemic for you to come up with his backstory.
I think it was Brandon Sanderson, because he dropped that Kickstarter, and like, he announced 4 books that nobody had ever heard of, or he didn't tell anybody he was doing it. And I think that's where I got that idea from. Like, I want to try that.
Wait, I can do that too. Yeah. I can imagine that would be refreshing.
Yeah, because it's hard to explain. Somebody once told me, like, you have a lifetime to write your first book and 6 months to write the next one, and it is very much like that. And almost all of my books have been optioned. So I've got a lot of film and TV stuff going on. So, like, a lot of different people weighing in. Patterson and I were working on a book called The Noise a few years back, and it got optioned by E1 while we were still writing it. So not only were we working on the book, but we had writers and producers and showrunners all criticizing, the text and saying, well, can you do this instead of this? We had to rewrite the ending 6 different times to accommodate, filming locations. It's a lot, so when you can close that door and just write a book for yourself again, it reminds you of what's fun about all this.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be it. So in September, the first Scarlet Door comes out, and then you'll have 2 more come out next year in 2027.
Yeah, and there's a TV show that's hopefully in the works. There's an announcement coming out for that pretty soon.
Very
so
cool.
Hopefully we're going to see all this stuff piggyback on each other.
So just a few more minutes if you have it. But how has international been? Was that ever something that you thought of before? Or has that just sort of been an added delight, I guess?
Yeah, no, I'm in 150 different countries now, like 2 dozen languages. I didn't even consider that at the beginning.
Yeah.
But The Fourth Monkey had just, my agent was able to sell it in these foreign territories, and it's just expanded over time. It's a great way to build your brand. Like, I was just in Spain, and I had a ridiculous number of people that showed up for my signings in this foreign country. Like, when you can travel to someplace you've never been and have all these people come and that like your book, like, that just helps you recharge the batteries.
Yeah.
From a business standpoint, though, I think it's a necessity at this point for authors if you really want to succeed. And you can build your brand in multiple markets. It's not that difficult to do. I've been experimenting with hiring my own translators, and
Okay.
possibly doing some of it on my own. And it's getting easier and easier. I'm not a big fan of AI, but I think AI translations are probably going to hit very soon.
Yeah.
Probably, maybe a combination of AI and a human, where the AI does the first pass and then a human cleans it up or something.
Yeah.
But the translation process is going to get a lot easier for authors to do. So I think every author that's out there, you need to start looking at that. Figure out a way to get your books into some of these other markets, because there's a lot of readers out there.
Yeah. Actually, as a former translator myself, it's a terribly paid job in the sense of it takes a lot of work. So
Yeah.
I'm actually super pro AI translation because if 20 years ago, if I had that, I could have taken on double or triple the work, literally, you know. And so you would actually be sustaining jobs, like a weird benefit of AI because it's taking away jobs for most places, right?
Yeah,
So,
and a translator honestly can make or break the book.
oh yeah.
Like the only market where the Fourth Monkey didn't sell well was Italian, and we've since learned it was because of the translation. So it's
Oh,
hitting in all these other markets. It's running up the bestseller list. It came out in Italy and just fizzled and died. And we've learned since it was because of the translators. So
okay. So you need
now
a
that we've gotten the
different,
rights back, they're translating it again.
okay.
So hopefully that market will hit too. But
Okay.
if you the moral is, if you can find a good translator and you're working with them, get their contact information and latch onto that person.
And keep them. Yeah.
Keep them.
Okay. Interesting. So then are you going to Author Nation as a speaker?
I am, yeah.
Okay. Oh, so it's like a thriller whole year, I guess, over there. Isn't it you and I'm blanking on the guy. He wrote
We,
Red
we
Rising.
had I brought in James Patterson last year, who got sick unfortunately at the
Oh
last minute.
no,
We,
he
we,
was
had, we had to
supposed to
do it.
okay.
Yeah, we had to do it remotely through a Zoom call.
Oh, still.
This year I got Andy Weir to come in. I think that's going to
Andy
be good
Weir.
enough.
That's it.
Yeah,
Okay. I was like, I know the guy. I can see the cover. Like, okay.
yeah. I honestly, I went to Author Nation a few years ago, and I loved the vibe that was there.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to other conferences, like Thriller Fest is great, but as a business, they're very good at promoting the very big name authors and very good at promoting the debut authors, but they don't really do much for the people that are in the middle, and that's most of
Okay.
us.
Yeah.
Author Nation, gives you the tools to learn how to market your book, how to sell your book, how to do this, how to do that. So I think it's a really good place for authors. So I'm trying to mix up the two worlds. I've been working with them to bring in some of the bigger names, like Patterson, like Andy, so we
Yeah.
can, kind of mash it all up. Because traditional indie, like I think all those lines are getting very blurry at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just all about selling books, and we've all got different ways to do it.
Sure, sure. So you would recommend that as an author to go and learn kind of that business
Oh,
part of it?
absolutely. Yeah, that's
Okay.
probably the conference you need to go to.
Okay, perfect. So after the Scarlet Door, what's the next one that we should be looking out for? The-
I haven't released the names yet.
Okay, you haven't. All
Yeah,
right. So we'll just have to
no,
keep following
it's
you.
gonna be the second and the third, but I haven't released the full names yet.
All right. So I will have the links to your website in the show notes. Is there anywhere else that you would like people to follow you or find out where you announce
No, I'm,
your
I'm
next
easy
things?
to find. I'm at jdbarker.com on social media. I'm at jdbarker on all the platforms, and the books are pretty much in every bookstore.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much, JD, for coming on and talking with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.